There, good morning. My name is Samata, and I'm having a little tea here, so excuse my pouring. I'm hoping to connect with some of you out there regarding your potential to sail. And if you're kind of getting inspired by some of the YouTube videos and other things, maybe you have a wish to learn to sail, you have you got kind of starstruck and you're wanting to sell everything and buy a sailboat. You're just being inspired by some of the YouTube videos. As a sailor and as a longtime live aboard sailor, I just hope to offer you a little bit of advice. And when I offer advice, I assume you're an adult that's developing your own discernment, right? I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to tell you about some ideas that I have, and also I have some experience. So hopefully when we're learning and growing, we're listening to other people that have experience. I don't have a following on YouTube. I don't I'm not popular. Popularity is not going to be my thing that shows you that I have, that my word is worth anything. I've gone through basically a lot of teaching. I've been a professional musician. I'm a carpenter and contractor now, and a sailor and waterman. I have been most of my life. So that's where I'm coming from, but this is just a new video. But my inspiration around giving you the video is because of not only my experience and where it's led and leading me, and also most importantly, the mistakes I've made, but also through seeing some of the other videos, the YouTube videos that are giving different impressions on what sailing is like. And even some of the ones that start out kind of humble because they're like gone through the rigors, we sometimes tap into their channel after they're already doing it, right? So I'm going to give a couple of examples of people that are on YouTube as examples of different ways of going about, buying boats or refitting boats, etc. So it's going to be a little bit long, maybe you having to see my face for better or worse. But hopefully it'll provide you with some help if you're thinking of buying a boat, you're thinking of living the lifestyle, or just thinking of starting sailing in general, because there's one thing like just drop everything and go do it, and that can be awesome because just forget about listening and kind of thinking it out. Just go do it and gain the experience directly, like kind of street smarts, which is kind of my MO. I have to try something and I don't really listen to people very well, which is a bit ironic that I've been a teacher. But I also promote that as well. Like, we have to do what we feel. We have to develop our own discernment. So anyways, I wrote a little bit of a list here because I've done this video before and I'm deleting it because I get a little bit off track and I don't really cover all the points. So I have a list, so I'll be looking down at it a bit here. So a couple things I want to mention. The first thing I want to mention is the motivation of getting into sailing. Different types of motivation. I remember when I was in van lifing, I was down in, I still do that, but not as full-time. I'm more full-time sailor now, but I was down in Baja, traveling along the Baja coast, right, from the west side to the east side. And I remember one of my big inspirations years and years ago was I saw a sailboat out in the Sea of Cortez. And I was on the beach in the van, and the beach was totally isolated. But the sailboat out there was just like, it was magical to me. And I grew up sailing, so I've kind of come in and out of it throughout my life. Always been into surfing, but sailing's been in and out. So when I saw that boat there, it was just like, I just sat there and was like, whoa, like that. And I just said, that is the way I'm going to do this next time. Like, next time I'm down here, it's going to be in a sailboat. And, not to limit myself to go down there again in a car, but it just seems so amazing to be out on that body of water in a sailboat. And I was just so inspired to try to, it didn't like lead to a direct shift, but I was just like, that's the way I'd really like to do it. I gained that motivation through kind of a personal experience that I had that really moved me, so maybe you're coming from that place. Another really great place I was inspired to, I remember years and years ago, well, not that long ago, but Nikki from White Spot Pirates really inspired me a lot when I first bought my boat, bought my first boat actually that I owned, because she was really in a place where she was doing a lot of the maintenance, upkeep, and refitting on her boat, Carl. and had just an approach that was like a fresh kind of get to it. And it's like she came off as if she had a lot of skill. I was super impressed with how she was able to really tackle a lot of these projects. And later on, she admitted she didn't really know a lot of how to do things, but it was like that part of the sailing life, the ingenuity you have to like assess and tackle problems, is partly like part of my, I think, MO in some ways, learning about it and growing in it, but also like part of my desire, like to be able to have projects that you have to kind of figure out, so that's a big part of sailing. So I was inspired in that way, and just I think also because of the transparency there. But of course, then there's, she was a very beautiful woman that really helped. But was and is, she's still alive. She's probably younger than I am. But also, she was on the water down in South America, and just like thinking about sailing a boat, around Panama and all that stuff was another inspiration, for me. And then there's other YouTube videos that kind of came along. I wasn't really into the like kind of party based ones, whatever. I was just always been a little bit more of a practical sailor that was looking for solo sailing or with a person, but just kind of chill to go in and then engage in those social activities as I want, versus that being my entire lifestyle. I don't want that to be my lifestyle. I want to be able to tap in, enjoy, and then be able to tap right back out. So I share my inspiration so that, if this video is helpful for you or you're watching it, to think about what your inspiration is. What is it? Where is it coming from? And very importantly, is your inspiration have some actual doing or practicality to it, right? In this day and age where we're spending so much time behind a screen looking at other people doing things, we can actually lose track of reality, like actual reality. The screens aren't reality. There's no one actually there in the present moment. And that's the main thing. One of the reasons why the TVs and the screens aren't real is because they take us out of the present moment and put us into a different time frame. So if you're watching this, you're not sitting here right with me, talking with me right now, nor am I to you. I'm talking to a camera, right? And so my intention is to spread a little bit of a word about this, but it's not going to be in real time. So your experience of me and of it is actually not real, in the sense of it being in a different kind of place and time. For these types of things, it's okay. And for other things, it's okay too. But if we're behind the camera, if we're looking at a screen and we're becoming increasingly inspired, we need to check that. And I say need, obviously, again, I'm saying you need to figure out what to do, but I feel we should check that with a very real thing. Some people sail on sailboats. They don't want to get wet. If you're one of the cat type people that don't want to get wet, think about sailing. Because the end result of sailing is potentially that you will be wet for a long time. So if you don't love the water, you don't love getting in the water, think about developing your relationship with the water, in the water, surrounded by the water. Get into some swimming, snorkeling, surfing, whatever. Get some enjoyment out of the water, so that when you're surrounded by this an amazing ecosystem and ecosystems, you can be in a place where it's like, yeah, I'm on a boat, but I'm also comfortable in the water. For me, it's easy to say that. I spent most of my time surfing. I've been a sailor since I was little. My dad taught me, but I spent most of my time actually immersed in the water surfing, here in the Pacific Northwest and a little bit in Northern California. So that ocean, and it's part of my existence. Like when I do my first duck dive in the water, it just feels like I'm home. And for some of you, you might not have that right now. But it is, I think, an important place to get really comfortable with. If you're traveling across the water to avoid water, I have a little bit of hesitancy to say whether or not sailing is for you, because you're in that environment. Maybe the forests and the mountains are more suited as a lifestyle, and then occasional trips on a sailboat or whatever. So check out what your motivation is, and check to see also if you're being a little bit duped by the the beauty of it and the adventure and the fun that people are having. Sailing is life. Sailing is life. And if you've experienced your life in reality, that it's an ebb and flow, right? It's got highs, lows, and everything in between. Sailing will help you experience the extremes of both of those. So if you've been sitting in this place, especially if you're like affluent and you unfortunately have grown up and live in a house in suburbia, and you really haven't had to experience like what suffering actually is, or the high elations that can come with being on top of the crests of a wave and just screaming your lungs because you feel so vibrant and alive. Well, you're going to want to, kind of graduate yourself into the experiences of sailing, which is going to be my main point in this entire video, actually. So, just assess yourself. Where are you at? Where do you want to go? Do you have any goals? And you don't have to have long-term goals. And it's sometimes a little bit better to set, for sailing especially, and other endeavors like it, set little goals. Like, I just want to get on the water and try it. That's good enough. Rather than be infatuated with some of the YouTube channels that are out there. Okay, so think about your experience. Think about, where you want to go. Think about also how you're going to actually get there. And the key word I want to point out with how you're going to get there is patience. As a sailor in general, if you're actually sailing versus motorboats or powerboats, patience is such an important factor to being a sailor. There's periods of time where you're becalmed. There's periods of time when things just aren't going right. I'm not the most patient person, like when things go in some ways, but like once I get on the water and I get into the flow, I become more adapted to it. But in general, you wouldn't call me like the most patient person. It's just that I'm developing that as a skill set of sailing. So when you're, if you're in the doldrums, there's potential you can be there for days on end, right? And then you're stuck in a rocking boat, figuring out what to do, all that type of stuff. So kind of assessing, where we're at and our experience and all that type of stuff. The next thing I want to mention is around skill development. So like, what's our process? What's our process to getting into sailing? And this relates to our goals, but I don't think it should really differ too much. I think it kind of goes without saying that if you want to sail, you want to get out and sail, right? There's an example of a guy who got probably been out sailing a little bit, but just got totally infatuated with the dream of sailing. Spent over $100,000 on his first boat and ended up at the end a ton of problems with the boat. Got frustrated and kind of like really just disheartened. It's really kind of like sad in the sense because he wasn't one of these arrogant like type A, like I'm going to charge and do everything, and I'm going to claim that everything's good even when it's not. He was a really humble guy. Seemed like a really sweet guy and just was kind of was disheartened through his experience, and I kind of hate to see that because he used a lot of his retirement money to purchase this boat, and it just ended up, I'm not saying it didn't work. I'm really hoping he gives it a chance, and kind of just gets some patience, walks away from the boat and tries to assess a more realistic approach to sailing. But he just went gung-ho into it. Sold, I don't know, I think one of these things you hear, I sold everything and I bought a boat. So what, dude? That doesn't show anything. I mean, it gives you some more clicks because people are like, dude, what's your problem? And of course, we're hoping it works out, right? Like, it's not like we're trying to diss those people and make them feel like they're doing something wrong. But I think for a majority of people, we want to be able to engage in a skillfulness, like maturity around things. And it's okay for some, young 20, 30-year-old to like sell everything and go for it and either have success or not, in that endeavor. But I'm here for kind of more practicality, more pragmatic approaches. That's why I'm writing this video or doing this vlog to help those of you who have kind of an ability to develop discernment and to kind of contemplate like, hey, is this for me or not? That's why I'm here. So those people will do their thing. So I'm kind of advocating for a more gradual and patient approach because that's what sailing in the long run takes. So let's talk about a few different ways in which people go about getting their boats. And then let me give you, after that, an example or maybe a suggestion of how I would do it. So you have different people that do boats in a different way and of varying experiences. I want to talk to you a little about James the Sailor right now. He's got the YouTube channel Sailing Tritea. He's got one of the most pragmatic, I think, approaches to sailing that you can actually find on the internet. And I haven't watched all of his videos, but I know he goes through a period from like refit to kind of coastal and like just short off coast navigation and stuff like that to greater adventures, right? And part of the reason why I think he has such a pragmatic approach is he comes from a little bit more pragmatic and humble beginnings, right? So he's not doesn't come from this huge affluency where he's like able to dump 100 grand into the boat. For me, that makes him more relatable to me. But he had experience sailing before he purchased his boat. And again, I'm summarizing, so if I might be off here or there, but I'm getting the general idea is that he gained experience sailing with quite a bit before he actually got his boat. But then when he got his boat, he had the experience to know that that's what he wanted to do. And he also didn't dump hundreds of thousands of dollars into his first boat. So my understanding, again, I could be incorrect, is that he was a working person, a typical, whatever category you want to be, but a working person that had to buy a boat and perhaps even couldn't afford that expensive boat that was really ready to go. So he bought a boat that was a fixer-upper and needed a refit, right? So he's able to dump a little bit of money into it and then slowly over time work and put paychecks and other things into that boat to refit it and get ready. And that's what I'm doing now. And he's out there. Like, I think he's in Australia or something right now. Who knows exactly where he's at, but I think he's in Australia now. But over that, like, there's persistence and there's a time where it's just like allowing little things to click together. It wasn't this like, oh, sell everything, I got affluency, I'm going to jump into it and go. There's like a pragmaticism. And for better or worse, sometimes that pragmaticism, that practicality comes from necessity. I can't afford to buy that boat. I can't afford to just get out there and go. And who knows, in our minds what would change if we did have that. But what happens is you gain a real approach to life and sailing, because everything that he did, and I'm using him as an example versus me because I'm still in the process here, it seems like everything he did allowed him to approach sailing in a very skillful way. Things break, he knows what to do because he built it, right? If he's having issues, he's already in the problem solving mode because he had to start in that from the beginning, right? Partially, again, gaining motivation and experience through sailing before and, finding out if he actually loved it or not, and then going through understanding that he did and he wants to do what it takes to get out there, right? So that's kind of like the James the Sailor, like in terms of roots, like pragmatic, like kind of do the work and get out there. That's, I think there's many other people that are doing that. So, but he's just one that's on YouTube that's really accessible. And then there's other people that came in with affluency and bought a boat and so here's the trick. I want to just mention something. If you tap into James the Sailor right away and you start listening to him right now, you don't get the whole story. You tap into the sailing and the adventure, and yes, some of the problems with owning a boat, but you don't actually get the full story of what it actually took to get him to the point where he is now. And that's a critical factor for any of us that are trying to get out there to sail, is like to understand like how much energy went into the refit and all of that stuff to get him to that place, because that's super important stuff. And if you tap into him now, you're like, oh, Australia, like sick. And he's got this, beautiful woman who's a chef on the board now. Oh, sick. That's the lifestyle, But that came from a lot of transition and suffering and like going through the rigors, So again, I'm like putting energy onto that thing. I don't know his experience or his life. I don't know him at all. But that's the experience I get from it, right? So the other thing is that someone starts to channel based upon selling a bunch of stuff and then just buying the boat and getting out there, and you see all the beautiful, like, tropical and subtropical conditions. You're like, oh, I want to go to the Marquesas and these other places. And then you get an itch to like sell everything and buy a boat. So my response to that is be patient. And I would suggest following some of the better examples I've seen and I've, I guess, followed. I mean, again, I've sailed for most of my life. So the way I started sailing was to get aboard other people's boats. And I suggest that if you're having an inkling or whatever of sailing and getting out there, really be pragmatic and patient around it and really assess like I've been impatient a lot, but there's also been, I've been saved by kind of some other some wisdom in there that's, allowed me to have experiences. But I got aboard boats as much as I could to race. And a lot of times you can, if you have two hands that work well, you can generally find a captain to get aboard and be part of a weekly race. Sometimes people just need crew, so you can post something out, anybody who needs another hand while going out for day sails or whatever. But do it like in a gradual thing, different boats, different people, different places that you're going, day sails, and then working up to weekend sails, and then longer sails. And then just see if you're like, if the water's your thing, see if it's one thing to go out in a, 1 to 2 foot long period swell with like, just gentle breeze. You're like, just best thing ever, right? It's another thing to be like in the Sound here. We have 3 and 4 foot, like 4-second period wind chop swells, which will make you sick. If you're prone to seasickness, you'll be sick. People have gotten sick here who have had plenty of open ocean experience because of the way it works. So you got to put yourself in varying conditions as well. If you get to a place from that, like you've had that experience, you're like, this is awesome. Like, this is amazing. I'm loving the water. I'm loving my connection to the ocean. I've had, the experiences that have made me feel yucky and horrible, but I feel like I want to still go for it. Then I think that's the time to really kind of move into the potential of purchasing a boat. And again, with kind of the patience and pragmaticism, I would suggest buying a relatively inexpensive small sailboat, anywhere from like 20 to 25 feet. I wouldn't even go up to 27 initially, unless you have a partner with you, and you make that decision. I mean, you'll make that decision by getting on the boats and sailing, right? But for me, if you get a boat that has a small cabin that can sleep, you and your partner, or you and your boy, or like 3 of you, however many you have, practical for that, for short trips, and you actually take the time to learn to sail that boat. And a couple things too, like inboard versus outboard. You're generally in a smaller boat, you're going to have an outboard engine, and that lessens the maintenance. So this is a big part. Initially, if you have the ability to buy a small boat, there's potential you can get something that hardly has any maintenance that's needed with it. And you check the rigging, it's like basically just a fiberglass hull, maybe with one through hole for the sink. There's no through holes for the engine. There's no diesel to keep up. You've got an outboard, which is very problematic. But if worst case scenario, you can replace that outboard if it goes bad and then resell the boat or whatever you need to do, right? So simplicity, keep the boat as simple as possible, as ready as possible, and you can get into those boats easily for way under $5,000, right? My Pearson 22 cost me $2,000. It's a great little runaround boat. I can camp in it for a weekend. I can just take it out super easy for a day sail. And the boat size is keeping me super sharp in sailing. Like, and that's another thing. Like, the boat is actually keeping me sharp, like my faculty sharp, my experience sharp. The sails are so easy to trim and move and change. Everything is just super easy. So sailing on and off anchor, so easy. Sailing on and off a mooring buoy, easy. Going in and out of the marina under sail, super easy. This West Sail 32, it's 1974 I have, never going to try to sail into a slip with it, ever. Like, even just jumping off the boat or trying to backwind the mainsail to get her to stop, I never have a wish to do that. If she's having troubles with engine, we're going to be anchored out in the bay, and I'm taking the dinghy ashore way before I try to get her into a slip under sail power. So we're talking about 18,000 pounds displacement, versus like 3,000 for the Pearson, right? So totally different story. With that small boat, you gain experience for the large boat or your next boat. So you can think of that boat as 3 things. 1, you like it. And you're like, hey, you know what? This is enough. I want to be a weekend warrior. Like, I want to go fair weather sailor. Awesome. This boat is perfect. And that's what I want to do. Could be a transition boat where you're buying it like, hey, this is a transition boat. It's just going to transition me into that next thing. Or 3, I don't like sailing. I'm going to sell this boat without much loss. If you put $2,000 into a boat, it's a bummer if you lose money on it. Like, say, you something happens, you ground it and the keel bolts or whatever, if it's a total loss, bummer, but not 100% $100,000 bummer, right? Or a 30 grand bummer or a 15 grand bummer. But more importantly, when you step up, if you've done a little bit of just the upkeep with it, you can step up to another boat by getting back the money, especially these 60s and 70s boats that are really just renowned for being well built. You can generally, I don't know if I should say generally, but you can get back what you put into it if you do the assessment before you buy it. So one of my earlier boats, Coronado 30, that's all it did. I bought it, didn't do anything to it, sailed it for a few years, sold it, lost. The sailing, community wasn't big on buying boats, and especially that model. But I lost a couple grand on it, I think, from the purchase price. But I got 3 years of live aboard life and sailing experience from that boat. So easy trade-off, $3,000 over a few years, not a problem. So think about the boat you're going to get and don't step up to something. It's going to be challenging because you're going to see something eye poppers, right? You want something with beautiful lines, but you can look for something that's got beautiful lines or the style you want in a smaller boat as well. And every time I go to my Pearson 22, she's just this little classic 68 boat. It's fiberglass, still FRP, but it's still has these beautiful, cute little lines. She's just a sweet little girl, out there. Like there's the, San Juans, which I love sailing the San Juans. I'm just not attracted to the style. They rip and they're super fun to sail. But when I get to this little cute little low freeboard, like just petite cabin and stuff, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so fun because it gets you right on the water. So that's the other thing is just kind of like assess what is realistic. And it could be, give yourself 6 months, a year, a couple years to really like get on those boats, sail your own boat if you need to, before you jump up to the cruising lifestyle. That'll do everybody a favor. It'll do you a favor. It'll do especially your family members a favor, because if you see that your daughter or something doesn't like it, or your son, you're not going to want to take them out. Like that's not being a responsible parent, right? It's like you have to assess to see whether the partner or children or siblings or whatever, they're liking the partnership and liking the adventure, So it'll give them a time to really feel into it and then also work up to the transition, right? If you sell everything right away, you've closed some doors. You can open them again. You can always work backwards, but it's harder than if you kind of do a gradual approach to, okay, yeah, I'm really liking this sailing thing. Maybe we're going to, start transitioning to more time on the boat, less time in the house or whatever. Let's sell the house, move into a condo. It can be a really skillful and gradual approach, especially if you have family. So yeah, that's my kind of general advice is to kind of take it slow and easy. Patience is a huge factor in sailing. Persistence is a huge factor in sailing. So if you don't have that from the get-go, that's fine, but you can develop it and you can start that skill set and be aware like, hey, the patience I'm applying now in the process of it, right? So it's like if you go into something really quick, there's a lot of examples of this, but if you go into something really quick, like the responses and reactivity in that situation can be really quick. It's quick in, quick out. People go into relationships are like that, right? Go in, boom, and then you're done, boom. But if you really take the time to set something up skillfully and you learn and you're attentive and you're developing discernment around it, you have a gentler bridge to keep moving and keep deepening, or a gentler bridge to pull back out without too much consequence. So I'm just trying to help you all think about an actual skill set to engaging in this lifestyle. And don't skip, like if you engage in the lifestyle, don't skip the history, don't skip the nomenclature surrounded by sailing. It's one of the things that makes sailing romantic. If you get on a boat and, people are saying right, left and miles per hour and down the stairs and stuff like that, it pulls the romanticism and depth out of sailing. It actually does. The nomenclature is such a romantic and beautiful part of sailing. Please do us as a sailing community a favor and put time into learning knots, learning your way around the boat, learning the nomenclature, learning to talk to people and help them understand the nomenclature. Don't be one of the kind of city slickers that just jumps out of their car and right into their speedboat, doesn't know the right of way, doesn't care about the right of way or right, they want to just rip out to the island as fast as they can. And forgive my term around city slicker, it's just generally in the San Juans, what we have is we have a lot of people that are just, really destination based. And that's what separates a sailor from someone who has a powerboat. In some cases, there's amazing powerboats and beautiful sailors that are on powerboats, but a lot of the majority with the accessibility are people that hop in their boat. They want to rip out to the island as fast as they can. They want to engage in that weekend, get done as fast as they can, and then rip back. And there's nothing wrong with having some of that destination base, but if you choose a sailboat, learn to sail it. Learn to sail it. If there's wind up, put your sails up. And experience what it's like, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing. There's no point in owning a sailboat if you're needing a motor everywhere. It's a slow way to travel. Might as well get yourself a good powerboat and deal with that. I see too many people in really good wind, not excessive wind, but just motor sailing, and I just don't get it. You have a broad reach, perfect sailing conditions, but you're motoring for some reason. Maybe because you can directly motor to your destination versus tacking, but that's what sailing's about. Sailing's about what you want it to be about, first of all. But for me, it's about, getting to a destination, relying upon environmental conditions. And that's what makes it what it is. The currents and the wind, they're meant to be assessed and worked with, not necessarily worked against. So that's my philosophy around it. But you'll do us all a favor if you actually if you own a sailboat and you actually become a sailor versus, and then, again, there's a learning period, right? But people are graceful around a learning period if you're trying. But if you're just a person that just doesn't give a shit, that's really disheartening to people who've kind of done it for our lives and are trying to, kind of keep this, the romanticism and history of this and the enjoyment alive, So anyways, hope you all are doing well. I hope this was helpful. A lot of talking in here, but hopefully it gave you some things to think about. And we'll see. Okay, good luck. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm not so good about responding to individual questions and stuff, but I'll do my best to kind of check in when I see them. If there's a legitimate question, I'll respond to. I'll probably go things pretty briefly because there'll probably be criticism and stuff like that if people even watch this. All right, take care for now. Bye.